Well, hello there, Straw. Huh?
This is a robbery. Put your silver on the table.
Hello there, Straw. Huh?
This is a robbery. Put your silver on the
The
table.
boat capsized near
Hello there,
Lampedusa.
Straw.
It was
Huh?
one of the worst shipwrecks in
This is a
modern
robbery.
history.
Put your silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was
Hello
fishing
there,
with a
Straw.
friend. It was
Huh?
one of the
Cries for
worst
help.
shipwrecks in
This is
modern
a robbery.
a dozen people. And
Put your
became
silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was
Hello
fishing
there,
with a
Straw.
friend. It was one of the
Cries
worst
for help.
shipwrecks in
This is a
modern a
robbery.
dozen people.
Put your
Became
silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was
Hello
fishing
there,
with a
Straw.
friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in
This is
modern
a
a
robbery.
dozen people.
Put your silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was fishing with a friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in modern a dozen people.
Put your silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was fishing with a friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in modern a dozen people.
Put your silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was fishing with a friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in modern a dozen people.
Put your silver on the
Francesco
table.
Barada's father was fishing with a friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in modern a dozen people.
Put your silver on the table.
Francesco Barada's father was fishing with a friend. It was one of the worst shipwrecks in modern a dozen.
This month, he announced his resignation twice. Far-right and populist parties torpedoed Draghi's government and are expected to prevail in snap elections on September 25th.
The Maggiore siblings come from one of the oldest families on Lampedusa. They make a living selling produce out of a truck in the city center.
We should vote for the far right and give them an opportunity to run the country
Living selling produce out of a truck in the city center.
before we say they are not good. We should vote for the far right and give them an opportunity to run the country. Currently, migrants are coming here every day without any rules.
Barada hopes Italians won't allow far-right and populist candidates to scapegoat migrants. Almost a decade later, his father has remained in contact with some of the people he rescued, and he says the sadness in their eyes remains. Natasha Ganane, Al Jazeera, Lampedusa, Italy.
A group of 140 Haitian migrants are being cared for in Cuba after their boat ran aground near the coast. Around 22 minors and several pregnant women.
तेरे
We
पीछे
have more
होने
than
लगी
3,000
मुंडियां
clients
दी
on
लाइन
WhatsApp.
बिल्लियां
Our
के
other
थल्ले
social
पोश
network
घूमे
accounts
होने
are
शहर
also full.
बुल्लियां
We
दे
can't
हासे ने
handle
भी
any
पाई
more
होई
requests
कैर
for
आई
money. We have
कन्ना
more
विच
than 3,000
वालियां
clients
दी
on
लाई
WhatsApp.
हो नाले गल्लां दे
Many of
लालियां
those
होने
accounts were
शहर
also
ओ
full.
बागे
We can't
रेशमी जा
track
सूट
any
तोई
more
होई
requests
कैर
for
आई
money. We have
कन्ना
more
विच
than 3,000
चलौनियां
accounts on WhatsApp.
हो नाले गल्लां दे
Many of those
लालियां
accounts
होने
were
शहर
also
ओ
full.
बागे
We can't
रेशमी जा
track
सूट
any
तोई
more
होई
requests for money. We have
कन्ना
more
विच
than 3,000
चलौनियां
accounts on WhatsApp.
हो नाले गल्लां
Many
दे
of those
लालियां
accounts
होने
were
शहर
also
ओ
full.
बागे
We can't
रेशमी जा
track so she
Now, one lucky ticket holder in the US has beaten the odds to win Friday's $1.3 billion Mega Millions jackpot. As the United States is the third largest lottery prize ever. The ticket was bought in a suburb of Chicago, with the winner yet to come forward. England's football fans are also hoping they hit the jackpot on Sunday. Their team will face Germany in the Euro 2020 final. 90,000 fans are expected at Wembley Stadium. That would be the biggest crowd for any Euros final, men's or women's. That involves
Across England, there's something in the air. This was Sheffield after England's women members of Lionesses thrashed Sweden to reach Sunday's Euro 2022 final. Nationwide screenings like this are bringing people together in public, and nearly 500,000 fans have attended matches so far, more than doubling the figure for the last tournament 5 years ago.
I don't know, it's family, it's more fun, everyone joining in, singing Mexican waves.
And underpinning the Euros, there's a whole ecosystem.
The other day cycling home and I was stopped at traffic lights and there was 3 old men and I could hear them talking about the England game that was on the night before, and just things like that for me is really special.
In recent years, women's and girls football has really taken off. By 2020, the number taking part in England had reached almost 3.5 million, but there's still a long way to go before the women earn anywhere near as much as the men do, or make a living from the sport outside the top tier.
Hopefully, like with the Euros, it's going to bring a little bit more attention to the game, and the women will start getting a bit more recognition because they do train really hard. It would be nice for them to be more accepted as the sports people that they actually are.
As the national team gear up for their biggest match ever, they'll be hoping the home can give them the edge over Germany, but it's not just about the result.
We hope that we got everyone so enthusiastic, and that at the end actually the whole country is proud of us, and that even more girls and boys will start playing football.
Of course, for the Lionesses, going one step further than England's men did last year and lifting the trophy is the ultimate goal. Nadine Barber, Al Jazeera, London. One step further than England's men did last year and lifting the trophy.
Time for a quick check of the headlines here in Al Jazeera. Supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr are camping inside Iran's parliament after storming the building for a second time this week. Time for a quick check of the headlines. They're protesting against the nomination of Mohammed Shia al-Sudani as Prime Minister. Iran's president has visited areas hit by flooding and landslides, which have killed at least 80 people. Heavy rains have caused havoc in dozens of provinces over the past week. At least 30 people are still missing. Ukraine's president has ordered the evacuation of the eastern Donetsk region as fighting with Russian forces intensifies. Volodymyr Zelensky also said people in the wider Donbass region, which includes neighboring Luhansk, need to leave.
It is important for all our people who still remain in the Donbass and the areas of the fiercest fighting. There are hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of children. Many refuse to leave, but it really needs to be done. This decision will have to be taken regardless, believe me. And the sooner it's made, the more people who leave the Donetsk region now, the fewer people the Russian army will have time to kill.
New York State and San Francisco have declared states of emergency due to the rising number of monkeypox infections. New York accounts for a quarter of the infections in the U.S., with 1,300 cases reported. U.S. President Joe Biden is back in isolation after testing positive again for COVID-19. The White House says it's a rebound infection, which can occur after treatment with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. Positive again for COVID-19. NASA has accused China's space agency of not following the international protocol of a space debris for a third time. The U.S. space agency says Beijing did not share specific trajectory information as its Long March 5B rocket tumbled that time. The U.S. space agency says Francis has hinted he may consider retirement. He says this week's trip to Canada has been challenging due to pain in his knees. As he left Canada, he called abuse committing Canada's residential schools genocide. This week's trip to Canada, and U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has told Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz there's a need for accountability for the killing of veteran Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Blinken met with members of Abu Akleh's family in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. Shireen was shot dead by Israeli forces while on assignment in the occupied West Bank in May. So those were the headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after the stream. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.
Bowles journalism.
The police violently dispersing protesters.
These are some of the tens of thousands of people trying to flee Kabul.
Inspired program making.
Welcome to Generation Change.
Unrivaled broadcasting.
White people did not want black children in their schools.
We have to fight for justice and peace.
Al Jazeera English, proud recipient of the New York Festival's Broadcaster of the Year Award for the 6th year running.
Welcome to the stream. I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin, filling in for Femi Oke. Today, examining the origins of the universe with the James Webb Space Telescope. It's the largest telescope ever sent into space, and its mission is to observe the birthplaces of distant stars, planets, and galaxies. Astronomers say it's a breakthrough for science that may answer humanity's biggest questions, including where do we come from and are we alone? To get our conversation started, here's NASA astrophysicist Amber Strawn.
For me, the most exciting aspect of this new telescope is really the breadth of science we'll be able to do. We'll be able to study objects from within our own solar system all the way out to the most distant galaxies ever, the very first galaxies that were born after the Big Bang, and everything in space and time in between. And these first images that we've just released really just give us a glimpse, just a hint of what's going to be possible with this incredible new telescope. And I'm so excited for the year of science that we already have planned, and I have no doubt with this incredible new telescope. I'm so excited for the year of science that we already haven't even dreamed of yet. And I have no doubt with this incredible.
Joining us to explain the significance of the JWST is our panel of scientists in California, Jesse Christensen, a project scientist with the NASA Exoplanet Archive, Renee Doyen, a principal investigator for the Webb Telescope's Fine Guidance Sensor and Infrared Imager, known as NIRIS, and in Nova Scotia, Lamia Mola, an observational astronomer with the Dunlap Institute for Astronomy and Astrophysics. And of course, if you want to ask a question to our panel, jump into our live YouTube chat and you can be part of today's conversation. All right, so much to discuss. I want to start with the basics, kind of the emotion of this moment, if you will. Jesse, we built this, I say we, of course I haven't done anything, but we built this incredibly complex telescope. I believe it's 100 times at least more sensitive than its 30-year-old predecessor. Why is this so exciting to you? What does it actually enable us to do? 100 times.
Well, Hubble has been such an amazing observatory for humanity for decades now, and there are some things where Hubble has just given us a glimpse. We have a hint. We think that there's something there, and we're very excited. Now with JWST, we'll finally get to the answers in some of these incredible questions, like what's inside the atmospheres of these exoplanets we're finding? How far back can we see towards the dawn of the universe? So it's a step we've been wanting to take for a really long time. So it's very exciting that we're finally here and the telescope is performing as well.
It's sending back data, and that data is digestible. To you, Renee, what is the most exciting element here?
Well, everything. I mean, you've said it. I mean, this is arguably the most complex machine that humanity has ever built. And we sent it 1.5 million kilometers away. And as you mentioned, many things could have gone wrong. First, this telescope was so big, so we had to fold it in a big, like a big origami figure. In the frame of a rocket, and then send it 1.5 million kilometers. Then we had to deploy it, and I used to describe this 2 weeks of deployment, this 7 days of terror. Well, really, it was 7 days of joy because things went so smoothly. And then we had to align these 18 segments with exquisite accuracy. You know, it's you can't imagine the precision you need to align these mirrors with one another, and yet it took several months. We did it, and it worked so well. And one thing to understand too is that this telescope is always behind a sun shield, always in the dark. It has to be protected from the sun, and it's very cold out there. It's minus 33 Celsius, whatever in Fahrenheit. This is so cold. So we have to develop new technologies to operate these instruments at these temperatures. So it was a lot of challenge. It took 20 years. And so, yeah, it's now we're opening a new eyes in the sky to answer big questions about the origin of the universe. And are we alone?
So,
and, for the first time, we will have a credible machine.
So on those big questions, just quickly, and maybe Lamia, we can start with you. We have in our YouTube chat, Solitary Kid convinced that we're not alone, saying there's no way we are alone. And I'm wondering, beyond that question, that big question, what excites you as someone who's already processing some of the data that's being sent from your vantage point, Lamia?
Well, we have been waiting for this data for so long, and just right next door to me is the entire Canadian extragalactic team just sitting there, you know, going through this data, and we're just all crying out in joy every time we find these little galaxies, really red galaxies that we think are, you know, might be one of the first of the universe. These galaxies that are full of stars, which might very well be our own sun and might have a planet like our Earth. So, you know, when you look at something like this, something that is like almost a time capsule where you're seeing galaxies at very different distances because of this wonderful property of light, you know, coming to us at the same speed, you just cannot feel, you know, you cannot feel alone in this.
Certainly, I think many of us are excited by that prospect, and we'll get to that at the end of this conversation. But before we do, if I may, Renee, forgive me, Jesse, you said something interesting, kind of comparing Hubble to this new telescope that we're celebrating today. And there was this tweet by John Christensen, not to be confused with someone from your family, I believe, but at least someone who created this really powerful tool. Take a look at this. I'm going to just scroll down a bit. This compares essentially. This is the new telescope, and this is the original sort of Hubble image, right? And this is the Southern Ring Nebula. Could you just, beyond sort of the fact that this looks like something that was photoshopped, what does all of this that we see here tell us that we didn't know before?
Right. So what we're looking at here is a planetary nebula, which astronomers are really bad at naming things. So I'll start by saying it doesn't actually have anything to do with planets. It's a planetary nebula. It's what happens when a star like our sun gets to the end of its life and starts puffing off all of its outer layers. And they create this gorgeous cloud that you see today. And the star in the middle pushes the cloud away. The detail that we have with JWST is going to allow us to discern much more about the physics, the actual physical mechanisms that are pushing the gas away, and how the gas is behaving gives us information about the medium that the gas is going into, the interstellar medium, what happens between stars. This gives us a glimpse at this.
And, you know, just to hear from someone else, if we can, kind of echoing some of those key points that you outlined, we have Christine Chen, an astronomer at the Space Telescope Science Institute, who really highlights for us what she believes is so groundbreaking about this moment. Take a look.
These first early release observations really give us a glimpse into how JWST will transform our understanding of the universe. JWST was designed to peer back to the edge of time to see the first galaxies forming. And indeed, the near-infrared camera captured Webb's first deep field in just 12 and a half hours, revealing a sky teeming with distant galaxies. And each galaxy has been imaged in exquisite detail, revealing galaxies with warps, bright star clusters, and those enshrouded in dust. And our newly formed understanding goes beyond these beautiful images to include spectra that reveal precise distances to individual galaxies. What used to take Hubble days now takes JWST hours. And as a result, almost every observation will provide a glimpse into the distant universe.
So, you know, Renee, when we say we are going to be exploring exoplanet atmospheres in more depth now as a result of this new telescope, What does that mean? I mean, some of our YouTube commenters, Ghost in the Blur, saying this is unbelievable and exciting, but when will we prove other life besides us exists? That is the big question. We also have someone named Ahmed saying, well, the more the discoveries, the more the unanswered questions. So do we anticipate that some of the discoveries being made already or that will be made will be surprises? And do you think this is going to really for sure make us know that there's life out there?
Well, we can't know whether Webb will detect life, but what we can be absolutely sure that will make giant step towards answering that question. You have to understand what we need to do. So we're trying to detect an exoplanet atmosphere. We're trying to detect the molecules that's in there. You know, on Earth, there's molecules like oxygens, and those are made by life. But you know, we haven't really done that yet on small planets. We have detected atmospheres on gas giant planets like the one we saw. The nearest instrument take this beautiful spectrum where you see these bumps and wiggles. You have to get used to these things. You're going to see many of these spectra in the coming year. And so that spectrum proves without any doubt that there's water in that molecules. And we can also detect methane, CO. And when you combine with the other science instrument, you get a whole suite of capability to detect molecules. And that's actually key to one day answer the question, is there, you know, biosignatures and or gas that are due to biological activities? You have to understand that Hubble's view was, in terms of colors, was maybe like this. You know, Hubble's look, and now Webb is like, you cannot see my hand. This is completely different. And so just like the deep field, we have a completely new perspective and with exquisite details. One big limitation about Hubble is that it goes around the Earth every 95 minutes, 90 minutes. So when you try to measure a light curve from an exoplanet, it's always interrupted. In this case, with Webb, we can continuously observe these objects without any interruptions, and that makes a big difference.
And Renee, as you're speaking there, I was showing the audience just kind of the comparison of the Carina Nebula, for example, and some of those elements that you were describing. I do want to kind of ask, or actually let Eric Baker, he sent us a question that I'll put to you, Renee. Take a listen to what Eric had to say.
Given that the James Webb Space Telescope only sees certain colors that are on the spectrum of light visible to humans, how do scientists go about colorizing the images that we get to see online?
Renee? Forgive me, sorry, Jesse? Sorry, Renee.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Sure. So what we have to do is we have to take the wavelengths that James Webb Space Telescope is looking at, which is in the infrared, which is heat. And we have to map those into optical wavelengths that we can see with our eyes. So we take that section of the wavelength that we can't see and we remap it in to something we can see. So these beautiful images are not what you would see with your eye if you were out in space looking at these nebula. We wouldn't see that. But they are giving us this rich amount of detail about the different wavelengths that these objects are emitting at.
And so it's not that there was no infrared before. It's just that much more advanced, right, if you will. Like the Hubble had this capacity to a certain extent. I mean, I'm reiterating, maybe I'm wrong. I think I'm wrong. Tell me, Jesse, correct us.
I just want to mention, so the previous great observatory that was an infrared telescope was Spitzer. So Spitzer was a NASA mission that operated from 2003 to 2019. And it had infrared capabilities and was able to see glimpses of this, again, give us hints about what was there and answer many interesting questions, but leave us wanting more. And Webb is giving us more.
And, you know, obviously we've been celebrating so far. I see that our two other guests are in agreement with you nodding there, but I would be remiss to not ask about some controversy. Of course, there's always controversy. We have, for example, this tweet saying, seeing the images from JWST comes with the bittersweet knowledge that the person the observatory is named after would not have wanted me or the dozens of other queer astronomers I know involved in this incredible achievement. It deserves better. Using that hashtag there, rename JWST. A lot of people might say, well, who cares? Why is this controversial? Your thoughts on this, Jesse?
Yeah, so James Webb was a NASA administrator during the Apollo years and was very instrumental in having the successful Apollo missions. Prior to his time at NASA, he was in leadership at the State Department when the State Department was going through this period of purging LGBT people from the State Department. This was in the early 50s. And it's not clear that James Webb had any specific role in that, but he was in leadership in the State Department at the time. And So then it comes into this, what responsibility did he have to stop it? Was he a product of his time? Was he following orders? It's very unclear the extent to which he was involved in this. So there's just some murkiness, and it's overshadowed things a bit. It's made people uncomfortable because you don't want to think that this incredible new instrument that was built for everyone was named after someone who wasn't for everyone.
I understand. No, that's a great way of putting it. Lemia, you were going to say something?
Oh, I want to add, the James Webb Space Telescope, it's now being launched in an era which is where science is now a lot more open, and now we are available, accessible to people around the world in a way that maybe the Hubble Space Telescope or the previous missions have not have been. We now have the data that was released today is actually available for anyone around the world to download and analyze. The softwares that we are using to analyze this data is also more accessible. And I think because the world post-pandemic has also changed, where we are now more able to connect with each other, conduct meetings and researches over online. I think we are moving to an era where, with the James Webb, where we will see people from all over the world coming into and getting to do science with this wonderful telescope in a way that has not have happened before. So I think there's a lot of things to look forward to.
No, most certainly. And among them, as much as I want to look forward, and we should, and there is so much to look forward to, I want to ask you, just for a little bit of context, Renee, Hubble versus Webb, if you will. The last time NASA launched an observatory of such kind of importance and significance, it was really deemed a disaster, if I'm not mistaken, in 1990. Some, astronomers like Sandra Faber, others saying it was an absolute kind of catastrophe. Why is that? And I don't want to focus too much, but how would you compare this moment?
Well, Hubble, what you're referring to is when Hubble was launched, he had some eyesight problem, and that was an issue, a mistake made, which these things are not easy to do, right?
Of course.
But of course, we learned but it was fixed, because Hubble is close to the Earth orbit, so we could send the shuttle and change the instrument to correct its eyesight. And then Hubble came back with his good eyesight, and it truly revolutionized astronomy. Now we learned from that, and we were very careful with JWST to not repeat the same mistake. And there's no problem with the telescope. And as I said, it's a very complex machines, but its deployment and its commissioning went fairly smoothly. And so we should be proud. And one point I want to mention is that what is very significant about this project is that this is an international project, and we live in troubled times with wars, Ukraine. And here's a project where humanity gets together and with common goals about understanding the universe. And that was quite an achievement to do this. NASA, Canada, and Europe all together to make this telescope now for the world. Now everyone can use this telescope.
Most certainly, and I appreciate you making that point. I also, just looking at some of the numbers here, I mean, just to put this into context for us, Jesse, I might be wrong, but I think the universe is about 13 billion years old. And we've been around for, what, about 1 million years? Again, my math is horrible. But the point being, with all these trillions of galaxies and just seeing those images, how they compare, what can you share with us about how this gives us a new kind of macro sense of where we fit into the world and where to invest our resources in the future? A lot of people might say, why spend $10 billion looking into outer space when we could be spending it here to fix our planet Earth?
Yeah, these are really big, important questions. And it's not a small amount of money, right? It's a reasonable amount of money. I would say it comes back to the fact that you referenced this at the start of the show. These are some of humanity's oldest questions. Like, where do we come from? Are we alone? And where are we going? And the deeper we can look into the detail of the universe around us, the closer we get to the answers to those questions. I think a lot about what it would mean if we found life on another planet. How would that change society? Would we all just get up in the morning and read the newspaper and the headlines would change the next day? Or would it change something fundamental about how we treat the planet and how we treat each other and how we treat the universe? You know, there's a lot of talk about colonizing Mars, for instance, and that's really interesting and problematic. Like, are we allowed to just go and take over space? You know, that didn't always end well on Earth. So we have to think really carefully about what we're doing. And things like JWST give us the information to make more informed decisions, better decisions about what we're going to do as a species.
Wow, that was...
And if I...
Go on, please, Renee.
Yeah, I just want to add that, you know, we often take for granted all we have around us, right? But what we don't appreciate is all the innovations that we have has an origin. And in fact, when you go in details, it goes back to answering basic questions. For example, I'll give you an example. The camera that looks at me is a technology that was devised in the mid-70s, not to do a camera to do TV shows. It was to equip the Hubble Space Telescope to understand the universe. And so this is through, you know, NASA funding to develop that technology. And now today, this is everywhere. It's not just for TV. This is medical imaging. So, you know, you should thank astronomers if we can see each other and take a selfie. This, you know, we are a curious species, and this is the curiosity is the deepest root of innovation. So fundamental science is fundamental to all we have around us.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Curiosity is the deepest root of innovation. I feel like someone should put that on a T-shirt. Lemia, I know you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, the budget that's being invested in James Webb, that's over a period of 25 years, but that's only a fraction of the cost that the nations who have built this telescope spend on military budget every year. I've seen a lot of debate about whether we should be spending more money, whether we should be investing this money in education. Well, we are doing this because we want to learn about the universe. This is all coming back to that.
And that's a great point. I actually want to put another question to you. A lot of people on YouTube asking about black holes, and I know there's always a conversation about that online. We have Ardi Benusi saying, how far back in time can be looked with this telescope? I know, Lemia, that's what you focus on. I do want to just piggyback one more question in here that was sent to us from Denise Lawrence. Take a listen, and then we'll come to you, Lemia.
Hello. I'd like to know if you have images of black holes and if you can even see a black hole.
So how far back can we look, and are we seeing black holes?
Well, we are trying to figure out how far can we look. We are trying to find, the galaxies, the structures that have formed in the very first few 100 million years of the universe, from the first maybe 400 million years right after the universe. And I guess the answer is just we'll just have to wait to find out how far we look at.
That's a good answer. Quick poll across our panel before we go. So the telescope has, as we heard, already detected water in the form of steam. You spoke about potentially methane and other gases being detected, Renee. Will we detect signs of alien life, for lack of a better term, in the universe within 10 years? That's what some NASA scientists are saying. Jesse, your vote, yes or no?
I don't think so. 10 years is too short. Give me 20 to 30 years and I'll say yes.
All right. What about you, Renee?
I was going for 2 decades. Yeah, 10 years is a bit short.
10 years is a bit short. And Lemia?
Yeah, I would say along the same line. So
yeah,
if Renee and Jesse says 2 decades, I will go with that.
But go ahead, Renee, quickly.
But, you have to realize 2 decades, this is very short. It means that our generation, will see this groundbreaking discovery. And that's really the disturbing way to think about it. So humanity has reached technological maturity to answer that question. And that, we should appreciate that. It's just really amazing. And, I'm not going to say that Webb is going to do that. But as I said, it's going to make giant step to understand the habitability of region. I think in 5 years we'll say, okay, here's a planet. We know there's water in its atmospheres and there's other molecules, and it looks like this may be a habitable world. That's the place to look at. And this will probably have other missions, other big telescopes on the ground to really look at immunity system. And this is where we'll make a major discovery.
And then just to clarify, we've discovered water and oxygen, or am I wrong about that? Jesse?
Oxygen, O2. I'm not sure about molecular O2. We have seen water, we have seen methane, we have seen carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, and we've seen sodium. I don't know about oxygen O2, actually.
I don't know what the concoction...
No,
okay, we haven't. We have that clarity. I don't know. I'm pretending I know what concoction of things need to be found to determine that there is life out there. No, I'm joking. But certainly a topic that really opens and expands the mind, even if it's hard to wrap your mind around this discovery and all the discoveries that lay ahead. Thank you so much, Jesse, Renee, and Damya. That's all the time we have here at the Stream for today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
August on Al Jazeera.
Kenya braces for a tightly contested vote as the country goes to the polls in elections that will shape its future.
The Listening Post examines and dissects the world's media, how they operate and the stories they cover.
5 years on since Myanmar's Muslim minority were forced from the country, we look at the plight of the Rohingya.
Al Jazeera World showcases the best documentaries from across the network, including a new 3-part series, The 60s in the Arab World.
As protests continue following the swearing-in of the new president, could Sri Lanka's economic and political crisis lead to a humanitarian one?
August on Al Jazeera.
Witness the oceans, witness the flames, witness differences, witness change, witness happiness, witness blood, witness sunlight, witness the flood, witness loss, witness charity, witness confusion, witness clarity, witness family and witness friends, witness the beginning, witness the end, witness life, witness on Al Jazeera.
New voices heating up the airwaves.
A lot of Chinese listeners who can't really share what they really think in their own country.
Shifting power bases.
The rise of citizen journalism has changed everything.
How did it happen? It happened on social media.
And the undeniable impact of the mainstream narrative.
Australians went to the polls with those images front of mind.
This is a war that is very much being fought out in the media as well as on the battlefield.
The Listening Post dissects the media on Al Jazeera.
Thousands of followers of influential cleric Muqtada Sadr storm Iraq's parliament, protesting efforts by his rivals to form a government. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky orders the evacuation of the Donbass region, where fighting has intensified in recent days. New York State and San Francisco declare a state of emergency. Hundreds of monkeypox cases have been recorded in both places. And it's a problem that just won't go away. Hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong residents are living in spaces barely big enough for a bed. People in Iraq are waking up to yet another delicate political situation. Supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr have spent the night camped in Parliament. They say they won't leave until their demands are met, including withdrawing the nomination of Mohammed Shia al-Sudani as Prime Minister. More than 125 people were injured on Saturday as crowds stormed the building for a second time in a week. Mahmoud Abdulwahid reports.
Once again, supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr occupy Iraq's parliament. But this time they vow to stay put until their demands are met.
We reject corruption and corrupt politicians. Sudani is a tool in the hands of foreign powers.
He and his colleagues work against Iraq. He wants to do anything for our benefit.
We won't leave until we kick those corrupt politicians out of Iraq.
A pro-Iranian bloc called the Coordination Framework has nominated Mohammed Shia al-Sudani for Prime Minister. These protesters have linked him to former Premier Nouri al-Maliki. Despite calls for calm by many officials, including Sadr, who instructed his supporters to refrain from violence, the protesters were far from peaceful. The health ministry has confirmed dozens of people, including soldiers, were injured when police fired tear gas at the crowds.
Everyone shares the responsibility. Political parties, the political elite, social forces, and influential figures. We have to say it to everyone, and everyone must act wisely, with Iraq in mind, in order not to lose again.
Saturday's parliamentary session had been dedicated to electing a new president, followed by the naming of a prime minister, who would then form a new government. All that is now on hold, giving rival politicians a chance to meet. But these protesters are worried that MPs could hold an unannounced session to approve Sudani. So now they're in for the long haul. Mahmoud Abdul Wahid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Well, Akil Abbas is a political analyst based in Washington, D.C. He says Sadr's supporters are waiting for a comprehensive deal from the government.
I think we passed the stage of who is going to be the next prime minister. The Sadrists basically want a grand deal, a deal that includes the judiciary, reconstituting the Supreme Court, setting some time for an early election, not touching or touching the electoral law, and then the premiership. So several things in one package, then this would end, supposedly. Mainly after Maliki, the arch enemy of Sadr, took over the coordination of framework. That thing really intensified this conflict when Maliki's candidate became the premiership candidate for the entire coordination of framework. And that really pushed Sadr to react, and to react strongly. Now he's waiting for this candidate to withdraw from the race. I don't think the framework will hold up for long if this protest continues. I think some people in the framework are waiting, are wanting some sort of excuse in order to leave the framework or kick Mr. Maliki out, and they sit in the protest in the name of national security, in the name of peace in Iraq. Some of them would make this move. So Sadr is giving them the pretext one way or the other.
Ukraine's president has ordered the evacuation of the eastern region of Donetsk as fighting with Russian forces intensifies. In a late-night address, Volodymyr Zelensky said people must leave the wider Donbass region, which includes Luhansk.
It is important for all our people who still remain in the Donbass in the areas of the fiercest fighting. There are hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of children. Many refuse to leave, but it really needs to be done. This decision will have to be taken regardless, believe me. And the sooner it's made, the more people who leave the Donetsk region now, the fewer people the Russian army will have time to kill.
Well, earlier, Zelensky called on the UN and the International Committee of the Red Cross to take action over an attack on a prison complex. Dozens of Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed in Olenivka. Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of carrying out the attack. The Kremlin has invited the UN and the Red Cross to investigate. 17 ships loaded with Ukrainian grain are ready to depart from Odessa for the first time since Russia invaded in February. More wheat and corn are being harvested as the war continues. The loss of Ukrainian exports has raised global food prices, threatened political instability, and helped push more people into poverty and hunger in vulnerable countries. John Hendren has more now from Odessa.
Ukraine and the world are waiting for 17 ships filled with grain to distribute food across the globe and help avert a global hunger crisis. President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday said those ships would leave soon, but they haven't left Yet there are a number of logistical problems involved with that. Some of those could be insurance, the fact that the waters are mined, and most importantly, security, because those ships will be traveling through an active war zone. We've also been told that the Secretary General, through a spokesman, has offered to send a team of experts to a prison in eastern Ukraine to determine whether it was a Russian strike or a Ukrainian strike that killed 50 people. Those people were prisoners who fought on behalf of Ukraine in Mariupol. One of the things they'll look at is whether that was an external strike, as the Russians claim. They say it was a Ukrainian missile, or whether it was an explosion from inside. That is what the Ukrainians claim. Volodymyr Zelensky says it was a war crime.
Spain has reported its second monkeypox-related death in the past 2 days. They're the first confirmed deaths from the virus in the European Union. Spain's case numbers are Europe's highest at almost 4,300. There have been more than 21,000 cases in nearly 80 countries since May. In the US, New York State and the city of San Francisco have declared states of emergency due to rising numbers of the virus. New York accounts for 1 in 4 infections across the country, with 1,300 cases reported. There are 800 in California, more than a quarter of which are in San Francisco. Mike Hanna's in Washington with more now on the US government's response to the outbreak.
What it means is that, for example, in New York State, the public emergency has been declared. This allows the state to permit paramedics, nurses, for example, to administer doses of the vaccine. It also opens up the door to greater federal assistance. Now, it is interesting in terms of the fact that you have had observers say that it's very difficult to coordinate on the basis of 57 entities. Now, that is the US's 50 states, plus the 7 regions and major cities that are involved. In San Francisco, for example, which is the first city to declare public health emergency, once again, that opens up the avenues of assistance from the state as well as from federal level. So it is a bit of a hodgepodge response in terms of the health department's way of dealing with this. And what I must note as well, very importantly, on Wednesday, the CDC said that there was some 4,500 cases reported. Last night, those figures were updated to some 5,400. Now, that's an increase of 10% over some 2 days. So clearly, this is a health problem that is not stabilizing. It is, in fact, mounting.
Iran's president has visited areas hit by flooding and landslides, which have killed at least 80 people. Ebrahim Raisi traveled with officials of the Iranian Red Crescent to the city of Firuzka, east of Tehran. Heavy rain and flooding have caused havoc in dozens of provinces over the past week. At least 30 people are still missing. Al-Shabaab fighters have attacked a military base on the Somalia-Ethiopia border. The armed group, which is linked to Al-Qaeda, says it's killed more than 100 Ethiopian troops, but the government says its soldiers killed dozens of fighters who tried to infiltrate the base. Journalist Samuel Getachew has more from Addis Ababa.
The Somali state government has been supported by the Ethiopian forces trying to fight with Al-Shabaab. There was a story that came out saying that 150 Al-Shabaab, at least, members have been killed. But throughout the week and even earlier this month, there has been different kind of claim and counterclaim of victims and victory and so on, enough for the UN, WFP to start removing some of its employees. The Somali region is one of the areas where it has a camp that's taking care of thousands of Ethiopian displaced people, and this goes to show you that this conflict is really moving forward. Al-Shabaab was claiming that they have been killing or winning the battle so far, but this is the first time that the Ethiopian side or the regional side, the Somali regional government forces, have really claimed this many victims or this many killings in a way to stop Al-Shabaab from advancing to the capital of the Somali region and far beyond.
US President Joe Biden is back in isolation after testing positive again for COVID-19. The White House says it's a rebound infection, which can occur after treatment with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. Biden first tested positive for the virus on July 21st. He left isolation after testing negative this week. Dr. Krishna Udayakumar is from Duke University. He says between 5 and 10% of people rebound on Paxlovid.
We have seen cases being reported of people passing on the virus to others during this period of rebound. And according to CDC guidance, the best way to proceed would really be to isolate again for a minimum of 5 days and to continue to mask through 10 days after that rebound infection. I think in the overall scheme, the Paxlovid is very good and is likely to reduce severe infections, hospitalizations, and death, as we've seen in the clinical trials. But we do need to be sure that people aren't ending isolation too early, and also are continuing to follow up and masking even after they finish their isolation. So it is important to make sure that people are taking measures after treatment to try to avoid infecting others potentially along the way.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has raised the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh during a call with Israel's defense minister. The State Department says Blinken told Benny Gantz there's a need for accountability for the journalist's murder. Blinken met with members of the Abu Akleh family in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. Shireen was shot dead by Israeli forces while on assignment in the occupied West Bank in May. Lots more still to come here in Al Jazeera, including looking for alternatives. Soaring gas prices force some Kenyans to switch to charcoal as they try to heat their homes. And England gears up for what could be the biggest ever crowd for any Euros final as the women's team faces Germany. More on that, stay with DC on Tuesday. Shireen was shot dead by Israeli forces while on assignment in the occupied West Bank in May. Lots more still to come here in Al Jazeera, including looking for alternatives. Soaring gas prices.
Now, the unusually
some
wet
Kenyans
weather
to
has
switch
not
to charcoal
returned
as they
to
try
normal.
to
We
heat
haven't
their
seen the
homes.
end of it yet, but it's not as severe as it was for the most part. The onshore breeze
And
means
England gears up for what
increasingly
could be
humid
the
around
biggest
the
ever
Gulf
crowd
Coast,
for
which is
any
Blinken
Euros final as the
but the
women's
deep
team
faces
faces
just
Germany. More on that,
showers
stay with
shouldn't be
DC
quite
on
as frequent
Tuesday.
in Saudi Arabia. They shouldn't exist at all in Bahrain or Kuwait. They're pretty rare in Iran as well, but that is the picture for Sunday. They will develop, and there will be some flash flooding, particularly in Iran. On Monday,
Lots more still to come here in Al
morning
Jazeera,
starts off
including looking for
humid, as you might
alternatives.
expect,
Soaring
and the
gas
showers
prices
go
force
unusually
some
wet weather
Kenyans
has
to
not
switch to
returned.
charcoal
Now, they
as
are
they
not
try to
being
heat their
quite as
homes.
widespread or as big. I don't think they're still there. However, you look down in Saudi Arabia, the onshore breeze
And
makes
England gears up for what
massively
could be
humid
the
around
biggest
the
ever
Gulf
crowd
Coast.
for any
Shouldn't
Euros final as the women's team faces Germany. More on that, stay with
shouldn't
DC
be too
on
frequent in
Tuesday.
Saudi Arabia. For the rest, it's still very temperatures are still quite high. That is a 46, not 50. They will develop, and there will be some flashes to Turkey and northern Syria. On Monday, the morning starts off higher, humid as you might expect, and the showers go usually wet. So we haven't had some return. They aren't being quite as widespread or as big. I don't think. Now, just a quick word on the seasonal showers. England gears up for what could be the biggest ever crowd for any Euros final as the women's team faces Germany. More on that, stay with DC on Tuesday
Tuesday.
in Saudi Arabia. For the rest, it's still very temperatures are still quite high. Around 10 women are being murdered in Mexico every day. Almost Turkey and northern Syria. On Monday, an epidemic of gender-based violence threatens northern showers go usually so we haven't had some return. Now, a special squad run by women is trying to behind Shireen with a femicide around 10 women are being murdered in Mexico every day. Almost Turkey and northern men. On Monday, an epidemic of gender-based violence threatens showers go usually so we haven't had some return. Now, a special squad run by women is trying behind Shireen with a femicide around 10 women are being murdered in Mexico every day. Almost Turkey and an epidemic of gender-based violence threatens showers go usually so we haven't had some now, a special squad run by women
Real estate is consistently ranked as the world's most expensive. It also ranks high for something else. The city's just recorded its hottest week. Imagine what it's like to live in villages cubes measuring just over 2 square meters. How long have you been in the city? For $270 there is now a rental space just big enough for a bed and a it's on the 6th floor is the parking range. The world's most expensive partition spaces. It also ranks high for something else. The city's just recorded where hygiene reflects the daily square. Imagine what it's like to live in villages cubes measuring just high to its low-wage social company like Shark. Here helping for the street also behind you. For $270 sunset there is now hundreds of space making just big enough for a bed now that it's it's on the 6th floor is the parking range. The world's most expensive partition spaces. It also ranks high have something else to be provided back to the city geography, having hidden it for a decade and taken such a what it takes. She says we'll not much history measuring to guide who's located close to the line sharp. For 200 is the reason why central people else are being spared now that it's it also back to the city geography, having hidden it for a decade and taken during the recent visit, she says we'll not much history measuring to guide you need to make it affordable housing for 200 is the reason why central people else are being spared now that it's during the recent visit, she says we'll not much history measuring to guide you need to make it affordable housing
or somewhere else. We don't see them on the island.
Yet the Migrant Welcome Center is overflowing. The uptick in arrivals coincides with the collapse of Prime Minister Mario Draghi's coalition government. This month, he announced his resignation twice. Far-right and populist parties torpedo Draghi's government and are expected to prevail in snap elections on September 25th. The Maggiore siblings come from one of the oldest families on Lampedusa. They make a living selling produce out of a truck in the city center.
We should vote for the far right and give them an opportunity to run the country before we say they are not good. Currently, migrants are coming here every day without any rules.
Barada hopes Italians won't allow far-right and populist candidates to scapegoat migrants. Almost a decade later, his father has remained in contact with some of the people he rescued, and he says the sadness in their eyes remains. Natasha Ganem, Al Jazeera, Lampedusa, Italy.
A group of 140 Haitian migrants are being cared for in Cuba after their boat ran aground near the coast. Around 22 minors and several pregnant women are said to be among them. They've been at sea for 8 days with limited food. The number of women murdered or missing in northern Mexico has risen by almost 40% in the past 5 years. The situation has pushed one woman, the city of Monterrey, to launch an exclusively female taxi service. Here's her story.
My name is Dulce Maria Campos González, founder of Girls Taxi Monterrey. a family-owned enterprise. We offer transport services for girls and women and guarantee they get to their destination safely. On our first weekend, we started trending and we were shared more than 42,000 times. That made me very happy, but at the same time, it got us thinking. Why such a reaction? It means that there's a vacuum in our community, that women are scared. That's what made us start this service, the fear of how unprotected we women of any age are in our community. We have more than 3,000 clients on WhatsApp. Our other social network accounts are also full. We can't handle any more requests. Many girls tell us why they chose us. Some were harassed, mistreated, even sexually abused by a driver. They are terrified of using any service with male drivers. We think that whatever a girl is doing on the street, she shouldn't feel threatened or in danger. The business is called Girls Taxi, but it will always remind me of Dulce Celeste, my daughter. I founded it for her. I want a female-driven cab in every corner of the world so she can feel safe.
Now, England's football fans are gearing up as their team face Germany in the Women's Euro 22 final on Sunday. 90,000 fans are expected to pack Wembley Stadium. That would be the biggest crowd for any Euro final, men's or women's. Nadim Barber has that story.
Across England, there's something in the air.
Honestly, never felt better. Got my best mate with me, right? And it's absolutely mint.
This was Sheffield after England's women, known as the Lionesses, thrashed Sweden to reach Sunday's Euro 2022 final. Nationwide screenings like this are bringing people together in public, and nearly 500,000 fans have attended matches so far, more than doubling the figure for the last tournament 5 years ago.
Ladies' football is just a completely different atmosphere to the men's. It's more, I don't know, it's family, it's more fun, everyone joining in, singing Mexican waves.
And underpinning the Euros, there's a whole ecosystem, from the Women's Super League to semi-professional clubs like Dulwich Hamlet here in South London to school teams. Hard to believe that for decades women were barred from competing in a game that the English Football Association called quite unsuitable for females.
At grounds up and down the country, women's teams offer the fans quality football week in, week out. But there's no doubt the Euros tournament has opened many more people's eyes. And for clubs like this, that can only be a good thing.
I've got mates texting me who have had no interest in women's football before, getting really excited about this tournament. Lots of guys as well, which is nice to see, people of all ages. I was on my bicycle the other day cycling home and I was stopped at traffic lights and there was 3 old men and I could hear them talking about the England game that was on the night before. And just things like that, that for me is really special.
In recent years, women's and girls' football has really taken off. By 2020, the number taking part in England had reached almost 3.5 million. But there's still a long way to go before the women earn anywhere near as much as the men do, or make a living from the sport outside the top tier.
Hopefully, like with the Euros, it's going to bring a little bit more attention to the game and the women will start getting a bit more recognition because they do train really hard. It would be nice for them to be more accepted as the sports people that they actually are.
As the national team gear up for their biggest match ever, they'll be hoping the home crowd can give them the edge over Germany. But it's not just about the result.
We hope that we got everyone so enthusiastic and that at the end actually the whole country is proud of us and that even more girls and boys will start playing football.
Of course, for the Lionesses, going one step further than England's men did last year and lifting the trophy is the ultimate goal.
England!
Nadim Barber, Al Jazeera, London.
Time for a quick check of the headlines here on Al Jazeera. Supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr say they won't leave Iraq's parliament until their demands are met. These are live pictures from outside the building. On Saturday, crowds stormed it for a second time in a week, camping there overnight, protesting against the nomination of Mohammed Shahir al-Sudani as Prime Minister. Ukraine's president has ordered the evacuation of the eastern Donetsk region as fighting with the Russian forces intensifies. Volodymyr Zelensky also said people in the wider Donbass region, which includes Luhansk, need to leave.
It is important for all our people who still remain in the Donbass in the areas of the fiercest fighting. There are hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of children. Many refuse to leave, but it really needs to be done. This decision will have to be taken regardless, believe me, and the sooner it's made, the more people who leave the Donetsk region now, the fewer people the Russian army will have time to kill.
17 ships loaded with Ukrainian grain are ready to depart from Odessa for the first time since Russia invaded in February. More wheat and corn are being harvested as the war continues. The loss of Ukrainian exports has raised global food prices, threatened political instability, and helped push more people into poverty and hunger in vulnerable countries. New York State and San Francisco have declared states of emergency due to the rising number of monkeypox infections. New York accounts for a quarter of the infections in the US, with 1,300 cases reported. Pope Francis has hinted he may consider retirement. He says this week's trip to Canada has been challenging due to pain he suffers in his knees. As he departed, he described abuse committed in Canada's residential schools as genocide. Police have arrested an Italian man on suspicion of murdering a Nigerian vendor. Video shows an assailant wrestling Alika Oguchukwu onto his back and beating him. Bystanders in the town on Italy's Adriatic coast called the police, but failed to intervene. A group of 140 Haitian migrants are being cared for in Cuba after their boat ran aground near the coast. Around 22 minors and several pregnant women are said to be among them. They've been at sea for 8 days with limited food. Those were the headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after People in Power. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit goes undercover in the Caribbean.
We don't use the word bribe. We'll just use a token of appreciation.
Exposing trade of diplomatic passports.
Today, it's $250,000. Unless you're hot, then the price will go to over $1 million.
Involving some of the region's highest officials.
My question is, what's the next week? How much? About 50,000?
Al Jazeera investigations. Diplomats for sale.
Around 10 women are murdered in Mexico every day, almost always by men. Horrific gender-based violence that threatens to spiral out of control. Specialized police squads are now trying to reverse the trend and bring the perpetrators to justice. But can they overcome years of macho culture and societal indifference?
A police unit is assembling at a quiet residential compound in Mexico City. These are detectives from one of Mexico's new femicide units, formed only 2 years ago to investigate violent crimes against women.
Hacer una inspección del lugar, recabar indicios en caso y enviarlos al laboratorio para su estudio.
An estimated 10 women are murdered every day. The amount of blood visible here in the hallway tells a powerful story, not just of the violence and rage that was here, but the vulnerability of Mexican women in the supposed safety of their own homes. Why is there so much violence against women in Mexico?
Es discriminación, es odio hacia quienes somos, es una pretensión de que permanezcamos en el lugar y en el rol que socialmente nos fue asignado.
Last year, thousands of women from all over the country, fed up at the torrent of violence against them, came to protest in Mexico City. The suppressed rage of these women boiled over in the capital.
Bueno, yo creo que también eran producto de cierto hartazgo, enarbolaban banderas muy específicas en torno a casos que no se habían resuelto, a casos que iniciaron siendo suicidios y resultaron feminicidios, y no había habido una acción contundente del Estado.
Hay rabia, frustración, enojo, y hay un ánimo porque las cosas cambien.
The head of the first femicide unit in Mexico City, Sayuri Herrera, directs investigations of violent deaths involving women. She's also reopened hundreds of cases previously ignored by police.
Son los nombres de las mujeres que han perdido su vida de forma violenta. Les decía que son 700 investigaciones.
In Mexico City's sprawling police headquarters, known as the Bunker, detectives from the Femicide Unit are called out to a crime scene. Norma Beltran and her colleagues are on their way to a downtown hotel.
Romeo 49.
Nosotros trabajamos en la Fiscalía de Feminicidios y son delitos muy de alto impacto que pegan muy fuerte en la sociedad.
Many of their investigations are crimes of domestic violence, murder or attempted murder of a partner or spouse.
Nos ha tocado que ya sea el novio o el esposo han sido los que han cometido el delito en contra de la persona y lo hacen pasar o nos tratan de hacer creer que fue otra persona, su novio.
O incluso hasta ellas mismas, ¿no? Que ellas mismas se provocan el daño, ¿no?
Expecting to be believed by old-school homicide detectives, perpetrators often allege their victim committed suicide.
Es inimaginable lo que ellos pueden decir y hacer para salirse con la suya. Ellos las han asesinado en sus casas y las han sepultado en sus casas y después de eso van y las reportan como desaparecidas. Entonces son muy creativos para diseñar escenas de supuesto suicidio, para culparlas a ellas y apuestan a que vamos a creerles porque la sociedad de algún modo siempre les ha dado la razón.
Room 7 on the 3rd floor. A young woman was found dead in the bathroom. Police won't give us details, except to say it was reported as a suicide. Unlike in the past, all violent deaths involving women are now investigated by the Femicide Unit as potential crimes. One of Sayuri's first actions was to re-examine hundreds of cases where violent deaths were classified as suicide.
Se investigaba con prejuicios y estereotipos de género sobre lo que significa ser mujer. Somos muy emocionales, muy impulsivas, depresivas, ¿no? Poco racionales, que seguramente tomaríamos la decisión de quitarnos la vida ante una situación difícil de resolver.
At the hotel crime scene, luminol spray reveals evidence hidden to the naked eye. Back in the office, Detective Norma Beltran files her report. After 16 months in the unit, she has a sense of mission.
Es muy importante como policía mujer, la verdad es que sí, porque pues somos mujeres, ¿no? Y nos ponemos en lugar de las víctimas y el día de mañana puede ser nuestros familiares, nuestra mamá, compañeros, nosotras mismas.
Every country has homicide units. Why do you need a separate institution dedicated to women?
Investigar feminicidio es diferente de investigar homicidios. A las mujeres regularmente en los casos que tenemos se les asesina por razones de género. En los feminicidios se presume violencia sexual hacia las mujeres, a diferencia de los homicidios.
Sayuri Herrera was a remarkable choice to run this unit. She was a human rights lawyer and an activist.
Las madres, las estudiantes con las que yo venía trabajando, con las que marché por las calles también, exigiendo justicia, que esta era nuestra fiscalía. que debíamos apostar por esta fiscalía, que debíamos recuperar nuestras instituciones.
To tackle the 700 open investigations in Mexico City, there are 18 lawyers in her team, 42 detectives, doctors, and an intelligence unit. Do you understand why there are so many murders of women in Mexico?
Creo que el machismo es la raíz, ¿no? El hombre es el que manda en casa, el hombre es el sostento del hogar, y que no sepan, ¿no? que hombres y mujeres somos iguales, ¿no?
At the residential compound on the outskirts of Mexico City, femicide detectives and forensic technicians are piecing together the story of what happened in the blood-spattered apartment.
Del inmueble como tal, vamos a hacer la descripción general.
Detective Jorge Paleco is in charge.
En este caso se encuentra la mancha, no es la misma esta mancha que esa mancha. Ahí me trata de decir otra cosa. El goteo. Ese tipo de mancha, ¿por qué se encuentra en la pared? Mancha mática. Y en esta, aquí se observa la mancha de un cuchillo, la figura de un cuchillo que es importante observar cómo se encuentra la...
The victim's brother watches on.
My sister, she was facing a monster. She was facing a real monster. The guy that did this to her. It's an atrocity what he did.
He took me by my arms and he pulled me away from the bedroom. And then he was with the knife.
Donna was stabbed multiple times by her ex-partner. It's a miracle she survived.
Can't believe it. I don't believe that he did this to me. I'm in shock.
Her attacker was her ex-partner, Marco. They were together for 8 years, but had separated not long before the attack.
I didn't see it coming. Never. We have not that perfect relationship, but it was not that bad.
My mom mainly noticed this guy was a narcissist, and he didn't want to relate with us, with my sister's family. He was controlling my sister. That's what happened.
On the day of the attack in early January, a few days after New Year, Marco came to see her at the apartment.
He started to say that he's going to kill himself. He go to the kitchen, he took a knife, and he was like, I'm going to kill myself because you don't love me anymore.
Donna thinks he saw messages on her phone from her new boyfriend.
After that, he was another person. He was like, your time is over. And I was like, eh?
He tried to strangle my sister twice. He hit her in the face. He punched her in the face. And then he took the knife.
The first cut he did was in my neck. That is all over my neck. And instantly I started to scream for help.
And then he started to stab her.
He cut my hands, my arms. He perforated my lung. I told him, Mark, you're going to kill me. And he said me, yes.
Donna's neighbor heard her screams and called the police.
Aproximadamente a las 20 horas. Pero estaba oscuro, todo estaba oscuro. Entonces mencionan que hay una persona armada.
¿Qué tipo de arma?
Un arma blanca, punzocortante, cuchillo. Posteriormente nos damos cuenta de que es un cuchillo de carnicero.
I was at the floor. He was over me, so I can't move.
Donna's life was probably saved because Marco slipped in a pool of her blood.
I found the keys, I took them, and I opened the door.
How did you get to the door?
I don't know. I don't know. I remember I woke up and I said, oh, thank you, God, for this body, for this strong body. Thank you, God, for my hands. Because this attack that I have here, I put my left hand. I'm right, but I put my left hand and I can defend myself. My hand is good, and now I can't move my 3 fingers, but I don't. It's okay. It's okay for me because I'm alive.
We are a society that cannot tolerate this anymore. We breed violence every day in this country. Maybe you read it, maybe you see it on TV, but you never imagine this can happen to your sister.
For me, it's very important that he pay for this.
Ixtapaluca is only 35 kilometers from Mexico City. But the progress we saw in Mexico City feels remote. Here, in Mexico State, more women are killed than anywhere else in the country, and the age of the victims is getting younger. A pink cross marks the spot where a femicide has taken place. This is the latest murder to have happened here, and it's left the mother of the victim isolated and terrified in this harsh landscape.
Hola. Hola. ¿Qué tal?
What happened to your family in December?
Mi hija fue violada y asesinada en diciembre. Eso fue lo que pasó. No lo fui. No fui buena madre. En México hay una palabra que se dice, tú eres chingona, eres fuerte. Y yo a ella le decía mucho eso. Para la edad que tienes, eres una niña muy chingona. Sabes hacer muchas cosas y eres una excelente estudiante. Vi la manera de... Veía la manera de comprarle sus materiales, su teléfono, lo que ella necesitara. En México hay una palabra que se dice, y no se lo dije, tú eres chingona, eres fuerte.
Melanie was only 13 years old. Her pink school bag still hangs on the wall.
Ella era un pilar. Muchas cosas y eres una excelente estudiante.
She had 2 little sisters, Fatima and Julia.
Vi la manera de...
One morning in December, Angeles asked Melanie to help her.
Yo me sentía mal. Lo que ella necesitara. Entonces la alisté a Fátima. Ese día Melanie no tuvo clases y le pedí de favor que la llevara. No lo hacía porque ella también iba a la escuela. Pero ese día le pedí el favor que la llevara. Ya no regresó. Fui directamente a la primaria con su maestra de Fátima. Me dijo que Fátima sí estaba, que la Melanie la había ido a dejar y que vio cuando se regresó.
One morning in December, Angeles asked Melanie to help Shortly after, Melanie's body was dumped a few yards from the primary school gate.
Aventada, llena de tierra, caritas, cuerpo. Como si hubieran llegado y a aventarla nada más. Su carita morada. Fui directamente a la primaria porque la habían asfixiado. Toda su ropa estaba rasgada porque la habían violado. Estaba en silencio, no pude ni gritar siquiera.
Now, a simple pink cross marks the spot where Melanie's body was left, connecting her death to the thousands of other women and girls killed in Mexico in recent decades.
La exhibición pública del cuerpo con la finalidad de enviar un mensaje a la sociedad del valor que tiene una mujer degradado. Es humillación pública. Por eso se tiran en esos lugares como basura. Es la basurización del cuerpo de las mujeres.
Every country has a manifestation of violence against women. But in Mexico, why is the violence so extreme?
Hemos tenido una década también importante de una guerra declarada por un expresidente contra el narcotráfico. Nosotras hemos visto feminicidios en los que el modo en el que son privadas de la vida las mujeres es aprendido de prácticas que vienen de quienes forman parte de grupos de la delincuencia organizada. Es lo que se llama el overkill.
Angeles has received a welfare visit from the local police. But she hasn't heard anything from the team investigating the murder.
Y Fiscalía pues no está haciendo su trabajo. Es increíble que no hayan encontrado al culpable cuando es un lugar muy pequeño.
The state has a femicide unit, but it's got little funding. The police response here seems totally inadequate.
Pues yo lo único que le puedo decir que estamos en México, que es mucha la impunidad. Entonces, no es posible que lo atrapen. Y demasiada impotencia. Es increíble porque en este país, si no hay dinero, no se mueven las cosas. Cuando es un lugar muy pequeño.
The causes are cultural, but also impunity.
Ingrid Sarasaba is the Minister for Women in Mexico City.
Femicide is a crime that we have in 2007 just put it in the law.
Do you understand women who say the police don't come?
Sí, sí creo y bueno, nosotras estamos trabajando, o sea, también cambiarle el chip a la policía, a una institución tan vertical, tan masculina como es la policía, también cuesta trabajo, but also impunity.
Ingrid Sarasaba is the Minister for Women in Mexico City. Donna is home from the hospital, tending to her wounds and in the care of her family.
My family is my entire world. Without my family, I don't know the way that I can survive to this.
Y bueno, nosotras estamos trabajando, o sea, también cambiando a la policía, a una institución tan vertical, tan masculina como la policía, también cuesta.
Her dealings with the femicide unit have been positive. Her attacker is in jail, awaiting trial.
In Mexico, not all the cases have justice.
Home from the hospital.
I want to believe that
and in the care of
most
her
of the
family.
cases has justice, but my family is my entire world. We know that without my family, this doesn't happen. So I hope this case is final with justice.
La Ciudad de México hemos venido haciendo grandes transformaciones y nosotros en el delito de feminicidio fuimos de los poquísimos estados de la República que redujimos. No todas las ciudades, no todos los estados están en el mismo nivel de infraestructura. Nosotras no estamos conformes. Lo que decimos es, ya no queremos contar mujeres.
I hope this case is final.
In Mexico State, Angeles passes the place every day where Melanie was abandoned.
La Ciudad de México hemos venido haciendo grandes transformaciones y nosotros
la persona que agredió a mi hija esté libre,
fuimos de los poquísimos estados de la
no voy a estar tranquila.
No todas las ciudades, no todos los estados están en el mismo nivel.
All she has left is a grave to visit.
Nosotros no estamos conformes. Lo que decimos es,
and no one to stand with her.
I hope this case is final.
In Mexico State, Angeles passes the place every day where Melanie was abandoned.
La persona que agredió a mi hija esté libre.
I care about how the U.S. engages with the rest of the world. I cover foreign policy, national security. This is very much a political impasse. Here's the conflict. How do we illustrate it? Are we telling a good story? Will people get what we're trying to do here? They're living outside in makeshift tents. This is not the way any family wants to raise their children. We're really interested in taking you into a place that you might not visit otherwise, and to actually feel as if you were there.
From the world's most populated region, in-depth stories from across Asia and the Pacific, with diverse cultures and conflicting politics. 101 East on Al Jazeera.
Frank assessments.
How much support is there for street protests that we've seen in Khartoum across the rest of the country?
The street movement has been very good at tapping into the core concerns of people across the country.
Informed opinions.
We will see more of these events. What is happening is that climate change is making them worse.
In-depth analysis of the day's global headlines.
Draghi is credited by some with really restoring Italy's credibility. His critics would say he couldn't play the part of a politician. What do you think went wrong?
Inside story on Al Jazeera.
News from Al Jazeera.
On the go and need to know? Al Jazeera's all-new mobile app is there for you.
This is where we dissect, analyse and help define major...
Let's bring in our guests now, joining us from...
Al Jazeera's mobile app, available in your favourite app store. Just search for it and tap download.
We will see more of these events. What is happening is that climate change is making them worse.
The new app from Al Jazeera. News at your fingertips.
Draghi is credited by some with really restoring Italy's credibility. His critics would say he couldn't...
Inside story.
On the go and need to know? Al Jazeera's all-new mobile...
Hello, I'm Darren Jordan in Doha with the top stories here on Al Jazeera. Supporters of the Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr say they won't leave Iraq's parliament until their demands are met. These are live pictures from inside the building in Baghdad. On Saturday, crowds stormed it for a second time in a week, camping there overnight. They're protesting against the nomination of Mohammed Shia al-Sudani as Prime Minister. Mahmoud Abdulwahid reports from Baghdad.
Once again, supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr occupy Iraq's parliament. But this time they vow to stay put until their demands are met.
We reject corruption and corrupt politicians. Sudani is a tool in the hands of foreign powers. He and his colleagues work against Iraq. He won't do anything for our benefit.
We won't leave until we kick those corrupt politicians out of Iraq.
A pro-Iranian bloc called the Coordination Framework has nominated Mohammed Shia al-Sudani for Prime Minister. These protesters have linked him to former Premier Nouri al-Maliki.
Despite calls for calm by many officials, including Sadr, who instructed his supporters to refrain from violence, the protesters were far from peaceful.
The Health Ministry has confirmed dozens of people, including soldiers, were injured when police fired tear gas at the crowds.
Everyone shares the responsibility. Political parties, the political elite, social forces, and influential figures. We have to say it to everyone, and everyone must act wisely, with Iraq in mind, in order not to lose again.
Saturday's parliamentary session had been dedicated to electing a new president, followed by the naming of a prime minister, who would then form a new government. All that is now on hold, giving rival politicians a chance to meet. But these protesters are worried that MPs could hold an unannounced session to approve Sudani. So now they're in for the long haul. Mahmoud Abdul Wahid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Ukraine's president has ordered the evacuation of the eastern region of Donetsk. Volodymyr Zelensky made the announcement as fighting with Russian forces intensifies.
It is important for all our people who still remain in the Donbass and the areas of the fiercest fighting. There are hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of children. Many refuse to leave, but it really needs to be done. This decision will have to be taken regardless, believe me. And the sooner it's made, the more people who leave the Donetsk region now, the fewer people the Russian army will have time to kill.
New York State and San Francisco have declared states of emergency due to the rising number of monkeypox infections. New York accounts for a quarter of the infections in the U.S., with 1,300 cases reported. There are 800 cases in California, more than a quarter which are in San Francisco. U.S. President Joe Biden is back in isolation after testing positive again for COVID-19. The White House says it's a rebound infection which can occur after treatment with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. Police have arrested an Italian man on suspicion of murdering a Nigerian vendor. Video shows an assailant wrestling Alika Ogochukwu onto his back and beating him. Bystanders in the town on Italy's Adriatic coast called the police but did not intervene. The victim's wife and members of the Nigerian community are demanding justice. NASA has accused China's space agency of not following an international protocol of a space debris for a third time. The U.S. Space Agency says Beijing did not share specific trajectory data as its Long March 5B rocket tumbled back to Earth. China says most of the rocket burnt up during re-entry. One lucky ticket holder in the U.S. has beaten the odds to win Friday's $1.3 billion Mega Millions jackpot. It's the U.S.'s third largest lottery prize ever. The ticket was bought in a suburb of Chicago, but the winner hasn't come forward. Those are the headlines. The news continues after Al Jazeera investigation. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. During re-entry. One lucky ticket holder in the US.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit is in the Caribbean to expose a corrupt trade and how that funds elections. Dominica's Prime Minister has just announced the date of their next election.
It's Friday, the 6th of December, 2019.
Our investigation reveals how the sale of diplomatic passports helps keep politicians in power.
Oh, it's the definition of corruption. Corruption 101A.
We don't use the word bribe. We'll just use the word a token of appreciation.
We show how a former prime minister acted as a broker in a secret deal.
My question is, what's the next for me? How much? About 50,000?
The current prime ministers of Dominica and Grenada are said to have been paid by wealthy foreigners wanting to be diplomats, something they strongly deny.
Today, as I understand it, it's 250,000. Unless you're hot, really hot, then the price will go to over $1 million.
You know what $1 million US can do? That alone could finance a whole election.
We ask why some ambassadors to the United Nations don't meet the UN's own standard on who should be a diplomat.
I find it outrageous that the UN accepts these appointments.
And we reveal how an Iranian, now serving 20 years in jail, helped pay for an election in return for a title.
I couldn't call him Ali anymore. He said, no, you're going to call me Excellency.
You know what $1 million can do? That alone.
July 2019. Our investigative team is in Panama to meet Oliver Serafin. He's a former Prime Minister of Dominica.
What's going on? Good to see you, man.
He's just had meetings in Dominica, hoping to set up a secret deal, the corrupt sale of a diplomatic passport. He doesn't know our undercover team is filming.
So I made a wrong. So I got who is the real closest to the Prime Minister. In addition to him, they're all good friends. And he's now a confidant and the closest person to the PM.
Serafin thinks our undercover reporter is a middleman for a wealthy European businessman living in Asia. He's willing to pay to become Dominica's ambassador to the Philippines and entitled to a diplomatic passport.
There's no ambassador to the Philippines for Dominica. So that possibility of getting our friend in there is very good.
Only Dominica's Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, could make that appointment. After 15 years in power and 3 election wins, he's now campaigning in a 4th election. Serafin says he's already heard from a contact that Prime Minister Skerrit would expect to be paid.
So he's not talking about the Prime Minister, but this guy actually picked up $500,000 US from a couple of friends of his for the position. So Skerrit is in the business of raising some huge amounts of money for himself.
Three months earlier, we're in Dominica for Carnival Week. The election could be called any time in the next year, and the floats already echo early campaigning. One band stands out. There's free booze on offer. They're the only float with a police escort. The band's patron is Prime Minister Skerrit's wife. Not all the floats seem pro-government. Several belt out a calypso that's a direct attack on the Prime Minister. The lyrics refer to a scandal involving the Prime Minister, a criminal on the run, and a diplomatic passport. Al Jazeera can now reveal the full story, which has never been told, although widely joked about. My Dominica Trade House was a venture started in 2014, not in Dominica, but half a world away. It was set up in Malaysia to promote links between the two countries. The man behind My Dominica Trade House was neither Dominican nor Malaysian, but Iranian, Ali Reza Monfared.
Ali is a very flamboyant person. It's like a magnet. He has this way of pulling people to him to show him this is richness, this is power, this is how you can succeed.
Manoj Bular and his wife Kiran have never spoken before about what they witnessed firsthand. Bular's a Malaysian businessman recruited by Ali Monfared to run My Dominica Trade House in Kuala Lumpur. He says they organised lavish trade house was neither Dominican nor Malaysian, but Iranian, Ali Reza Monfared.
Ali is a very flamboyant person. It's like a magnet. He has this way of pulling people to him to show him this is richness, this is power, this is how...
Promotions attended by senior Dominican politicians who expected gifts.
Yeah, lots of Montblanc pens, wallets led away, Cartier watches, jewelries. We had 10 bars of gold, 100 grams each, printed up with My Dominica Trade House stamped on it.
How much was the value of each of those bars?
10, 15,000.
After 6 months of hosting several Dominican delegations, Monfared welcomed Dominica's Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, to Malaysia. He came with a present for Ali Monfared.
Ali received his diplomatic passport through the hands of the Prime Minister personally when he came down to Kuala Lumpur. He had a big lavish party and he announced, he said, I just got my passport. The Prime Minister just gave me my passport.
An Iranian, Ali Monfared, was now Dominica's ambassador to Malaysia.
He was a high in cloud nine, like he was saying that he was a king. His excellency, call him excellency.
I couldn't call him Ali anymore. He said, no, you're going to call me excellency.
The rules of diplomatic relations were laid down by the United Nations in the Vienna Convention. Ambassadors can live tax-free in the country they're appointed to. Diplomatic bags can't be opened. Their homes and embassies can't be searched. And ambassadors are normally immune from arrest. Monfared quickly exploits that. At the My Dominica Trade House office in Kuala Lumpur, a rowdy party leads to a police raid.
20 cops came out and they went straight to the office. Ali locked himself behind the office door and all he did was showed his diplomatic passport and said, I'm a diplomat. And that's when the police just walked away.
The Bulars say they paid for the house, which became Monfared's home and the Dominican embassy.
We had a lake right